Welcome back to the channel, fellow aviators. When we last left off, we had returned the PC-12, and now I have about 80,000 credits burning a hole in my pocket, but no plane. And as we talked about in the last episode, I think it's time to upgrade to the King Air, the 350. And so for many of you, you've probably already seen this, but for everyone new, we're just going to go through this really quickly. Just come into the aircraft tile. And I've already loaded up, the key is to load up Microsoft Flight Simulator first, and then it'll find the aircraft that you want to have. And so we'll just hit Aircraft Market, search for the aircraft to have located in my simulator, and that's exactly what we want to have. We want to see the Beechcraft King Air 350. We'll come up here and display sell, rent, and lease offers. And here's the only issue you might run into. Even though I'm actually in Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's giving me this weird airport. I have no idea where that's at. Last time I think I did this, or when I first started, it was in Malaysia someplace. So just come up here and we will change that to the to the airport I'm currently located at. And now we should see a list. Search aircraft database. And now we have an aircraft list generated from around the airport I'm located at, right? So that's probably the biggest kind of hurdle or mistakes, at least I've made doing this. All right, and so luckily it looks like there is a King Air right here located on the field. We can organize it by distance. Let's check that out. And we're looking for ones we can rent since I don't have about 3 million in cash on me. So now I'm just looking for what has the most amount of hours before the next workshop inspection. We'll take, I think, this one right here. And we'll come back here to renting bond, and then we're going to have to pay the $64,000, which is 10 hours worth of as a bond. And it'll cost us $6,400 an hour to rent it. And here we can come up to the configuration screen. As we've seen in other videos, and if you haven't, you can change these at a later date. I know for sure I'm going to want a couple first class seats because you generate some pretty good revenue on those medical missions. So we'll just put 4 in there, and we don't need any extra cargo capacity. Can we put another seat in here? Let's put 9 and 4. Perfect. So we'll have 9 economy seats, 4 first class seats. And just so you know, you can always put an economy passenger into a first class seat, but not the other way around. That makes sense. And let's pay the bond and start the rent. We'll get notified. And now the next thing we need to do is I am not qualified to fly this aircraft. If we come back to the home screen and we go down to the employee, I'm the only employee. We'll click on me and manage. And we'll see I've actually have 2 ratings, the single engine piston land and the single turboprop land, right, for the PC-12, the Kodiak 100. So what I need to come back here, we'll go back to the aircraft tab. We'll go into manage, and then we're going to say check ride. And then from here, we can take the check ride in the King Air. This is one of the few times you can start right on the runway. So let's just go ahead and do that. We will start the aircraft on the runway and we will get going, because I think what I'd like to do is just go through this check ride pretty quickly in case y'all haven't seen it before, and then we'll accept a mission and I'll fly an abbreviated mission in this episode. Okay, so I'll check back with you on the runway. Okay, folks, I'm back with you on the runway. Unfortunately, it's been a hot minute since I've recorded, and I completely messed up the check ride. So we're starting back up on the runway. I've already accepted a mission down south. What we missed, in case you guys haven't seen it or don't remember recently, is you just need to take off runway heading, climb up to 4,500 feet, then enter slow flight. In the King Air, they want you at or below 105 knots. Make a 360-degree turn to the left, then proceed on course of 270, back up to normal speed for another minute or two, couple minutes, and then return back to the airport. So unfortunately, I messed up my recording, and I don't have that. I just thought we would just go ahead and advance. I went back in, accepted a job down a little bit to the southeast, a couple hundred miles. And so we can just go ahead and take off. We'll talk about a couple things. I've got it set up at flight level 260. I'm going to dial in about 160 knots or so on the airspeed. That's what it calls for the departure below about 10,000 feet. This aircraft has a V1 speed, and that's the first time we've flown an aircraft that actually has that. And so it has a V1 speed of, what is it? I think about 105 knots. VR speed is 108. V1, that's something we use in the airlines as well. That is the speed that no matter what, we are going flying, right? V1 means if you have an engine fire, unless like the wing falls off and you physically cannot fly, you are taking off. What it's telling us is that there's probably not going to be runway left available for us, and so you're going to go ahead and take off. So VR is the speed that we're going to rotate, and that's going to be about 108 knots. I've noticed on this aircraft, I've flown it. This will be my third flight in it. It starts getting light at around 95, 100 knots or so, and I just go ahead and normally just let it lift off the ground. But technically, in the King Air 350, 104 V1, 108 VR. The VR speed obviously would change depending on aircraft load, and as well in this aircraft, unless it's on a short field, you're normally going to take off with flaps up. So that's a little bit different too. So I just finished here dialing in. If you look down here, about 160 knots on the climb out. That looks good. We got 26,000 feet. We're heading down about 455 miles. So most of this flight I will just do on my own. But I just wanted to cover a couple of quick things for the takeoff. I've also noticed in this aircraft too, kind of weird, that as I bring up power, and you're looking for about 90% on the N1 for takeoff, so you don't exceed a limitation, that even with, I was just looking down here, even with the parking brake set at around 80 something on the N1, the aircraft just starts moving forward. The brakes, whether, I don't know if that's in the real world or just here in the sim, just doesn't seem to hold it. So we're going to go ahead and take off. I've got us in heady mode, and I think that's about it. So just double checking everything. All my engines are running. All right. So let's go ahead and bring up the N1, and you'll see I'll just right about here, seems like it starts to move even with the parking brake on, so I'll just go ahead at this point, release it. I don't know why it does that, and I'll just continue up to...
Your flight will be monitored until you land and shut down the engines.
About 90 there on the N1. Let's hold center line. And coming up on about 100 V1 and rotate. All right, nice positive rate.
Logged.
Gear up. Doing that low-level pass. It's not about 10 degrees. I'll let the airspeed catch up to me. And we can just start a turn kind of on heading here. See, I was just trying to use the command bars actually, and I started descending a little bit. So, see what's that holding? About 100, and probably should choose more like maybe 125 on the takeoff there, just to get us up and away. Make sure we got max torque in here without max power. Over, and then we will hit nav and our autopilot. See how that works. Make sure we got a nice climb rate up. All right, the aircraft's going to waggle itself back and forth as it picks up the nav course. All right, so like as I mentioned before, this is literally, I think, my third flight. I did one pattern with it just to get the cameras all kind of set up the way I wanted them. I did the check ride, which you guys didn't get to see, and then this flight. And so I think choosing 160 on the climb out, I think it's just too much. Barely getting 1,000 feet per minute. Yep, there we go. Right there in the limitation. So let's pull back. There we go. All right, 89 on the torque. That looks good. Definitely helps the climb out. So I think maybe I was just slightly underpowered. Let's go ahead and sync up our heading just in case we need that. All right, so as I mentioned, it has been a couple minutes since I've made a recording. Almost 2 weeks. So the episode that just came out last Sunday, I had intended to come out last Saturday. So yes, I apparently know how to fly a Airbus 321 with 250 passengers, but I can't seem to manage to have my videos go out on the day I want, which was supposed to be last Saturday. Anyway, so I have been away from recording and from home for a couple weeks. The very first thing I did is, I mentioned the last episode, I had my annual check ride. Or actually biannual. So every 6 months we take a check ride. We have one that's called a proficiency check, and then we have one that's called proficiency training. So I was on proficiency training, the PT. It's the easier of the two. It does allow you to make some slight mistakes. It's supposed to be quote unquote training, but you can fail it. So that went pretty well. I did make some mistakes. It was not actually one of my better actual check rides. I can even tell you what ended up happening is, so for the most part, every check ride is almost the same. And it's the same whether I was flying helicopters or airplanes, Part 135 or Part 121, which is airline stuff. And that is that you have to do 4 approaches, 2 precision approaches, 2 non-precision approaches. One of the precision approach, and that's going to be like an ILS, RNP Zulu, right? One of those has to be hand flown with a single engine. The other 2, they don't particularly care. So 4 approaches, 2 precision, 2 non-precision, one has to be hand flown. In addition, they're going to want to see a aircraft evacuation and a couple other things. So normally what happens is we will depart, and then we'll be forced to return back to the airport. We normally do them out of Denver. The other airports we do them out of would be Portland, Oregon, PDX, and where's the other one we normally do it out of? Can't remember. Haven't done it for a while, at least out of a different airport. And the reason is because the sim instructors, they have a nice real flow with the Denver airports with all the different runways. They can really minimize the time that we're actually up there flying, and they can use it for training or showing us stuff. So what normally happens, we'll depart. I think we're heading down to Austin from Denver. And of course, as soon as you take off, there is an event that they close Austin. They ask you to return back to Denver. The weather is below Cat 1 minimum, so less than 200 feet. Overcast, less than half-mile visibility. And then they'll degrade something on the aircraft, and instead of us being able to do a Cat 3 auto land, it'll go to a Cat 2. Why? I don't know. Well, we're going to do a Cat 3 later. But they want to see us identify the problem, take corrective action, and then go into a Cat 2. At that point, you'll usually shoot a missed approach, and then you'll climb back out up to about 10,000 feet, and then you'll do your stalls and steep turns. Then they'll have you circle back around into an RNAV Zulu with a hold, and then that'll go, usually at that point, another missed approach, but then they'll fail an engine, and so you'll climb out. They'll let the engine get restarted. Then you'll do a localizer only approach to a full stop. They'll reset the sim. They'll have you do one aborted takeoff, high speed, low speed, and they're just looking particularly for the first officer to make the correct call outs, for the captain to also make the correct call outs, but to perform the ECAM action. They'll reset the aircraft again, then you'll take off, and then you'll do a V1 cut, which is what I was mentioning before. That's anything after V1 you have to continue on, so it'll be a V1 cut with an engine fire that can't be recoverable. You can extinguish it, but you're not going to restart the engine. And then you'll fly single engine all the way around, and then as you approach the final approach fix, so you'll be running all the ECAMs, all that kind of stuff, and then at the final approach fix, you'll disengage the autopilot, you'll hand fly it in after you land. Generally, they don't have to, but they want to see it. They'll do an aircraft evacuation. There's a couple like kind of gotcha things on it, no big deal. And then you'll finally end up, they'll reset the aircraft on about an 8-mile final, and then you'll do a Cat 3 auto land, which is super easy for the captain. Captain always does the Cat 2, Cat 3 work. The only difference is on the Cat 3, the first officer has to make call outs. On the Cat 2 stuff, the computer does it. Once again, but you're always going to pretty much land, and then that's the end of the check ride. So coming up past 10,000, we'll turn our landing light off. And so that's kind of the procedure. You do it almost, and I did that almost the same thing, even in a helicopter. The last approach would normally be single engine, because I was flying the Eurocopter, the EC-135, and then I'd have to hand fly it on the last approach. They change up the order a little bit, but as you can see, but that's pretty much what we're going to do almost every single check ride, PT, PC. The difference is how many mistakes you can make. On the PC, the proficiency check, you're allowed to make one mistake and one mistake only, and then they can retrain that in the aircraft. So if you kind of screw up your V1 cut, they'll reset the simulator, they'll see what went wrong, and then you do it again. If you make another mistake, then you failed your check ride. That's it. You'll be sent home for at least 72 hours. They'll bring you back in for one training session to identify and correct what was your issue, and then you take another check ride. If you fail that check ride, now you enter the double secret probation world of you can now get fired. And then any other failure, a third check ride failure within 24 months is an automatic dismissal from the airline. So obviously a lot of pressure when you're doing the check rides. A significant amount, right? I mean, you can literally go from being an airline captain to working as a door greeter at Walmart under the space of about an hour. So I was doing, once again, the PT, proficiency training, and on that one, they can actually, there is no limit to how many things they can train you on, and they can retrain each maneuver up to 3 times. And after that, and then, but if you red screen the aircraft or crash it, well, then the check ride's over, right? But practically speaking, you can make a couple mistakes, and because it is really there to correct any deficiencies. The pressure's a little bit less. I don't study as hard before going out. That showed during the oral exam, but whatever. Passing is passing. So, in any event, on the very first Cat 2 approach, I, of course, am expecting the go-around. You almost always get it. Usually they do it as kind of like a Bach landing, where just before you land, they'll inform you that there's a herd of elephants that broke loose from the zoo on the runway. Please go around. Small child wandering on the runway, whatever they do, but it's usually a Bach landing. So I'm already kind of thinking the next step ahead, right? I'm thinking, I've got this Cat 2 I'm doing, and now I'm starting to think, okay, we're going into the go-around. Will he fail the engine? What are my altitudes? Normally in a go-around, you're going to add 1,000 feet above the lowest minimum, so it's slightly different than your V1 cut altitude. So I'm just kind of prepping myself and going to the next stage, or trying to be ahead. And what he did is he actually failed the autopilot at about 600 feet. You do get a bright red flash in the cockpit. You get a triple chime chirp to let you know that there's changing of the mode. And my mistake, and it was definitely a mistake, is I then tried to identify the ECAM action. I knew something was wrong, and there's very tight tolerances on what can be broken on a Cat 2 or Cat 3. So I immediately initiated a go around. But I didn't identify that the autopilot was not working. So we continued down. Like, it took me a couple seconds to recognize that what was broken was the autopilot. So I continued down that trajectory of landing, didn't raise the nose, continued on down. And my FO, the normal call out is go around flaps. The FO will say positive brake. I will call gear up, and we'll go through some speed checks, all that kind of stuff. So I simply said go around flaps. The FO did that, reduced the flap setting by 1. I think we were in flaps 3, maybe flaps full, flaps full. He goes to flaps 3, and then without saying anything, he went to gear up. He didn't make the positive brake call out and didn't wait for me to ask him to put the gear up, which actually, I'll be honest with you, probably worked out in my favor, because as soon as he put the gear up, I got the too low sync rate, too low pull up, which was immediately drew my attention back to the flight tracker. Remember, I'm doing a Cat 2, so it's just gray out. There's no visual references. So it drew me back to the flight directors, because I was not expecting that. So what I thought I was performing a go around with the autopilot. And so once I saw that, obviously I pitched to the correct angle, we pulled out of there. And then of course the sim instructor stopped the sim. Enough of that, right? So that was definitely a bust. He was very irritated. He is known for being, when I had him, I was not exactly ecstatic. He's known for being a bit of an ass. But he was fine. He's just a very old school. The guy's 80 years old. He was flying around, probably, I don't know, the Wright brother flyer. And, he really likes and goes real in-depth on systems, which for me, my weakest point, I fully admit that. My last check ride, that guy liked doing the Volume 1 stuff, which is all about when do I need an amended release? When does international operations starts? All these little rules that actually are probably a little bit more relative to being an actual captain. Because the truth is we don't do a whole lot of diagnosing systems when we're flying. It's not like it was in the 50s, where you have a flight engineer and something's broken and you're trying to figure out what's wrong. I have an ECAM procedure, and it's either going to be addressed in the ECAM procedure, or I'll have to find it. And I mean by the ECAM procedure what I see on my MFDs, or I have to go through the book. So there's not a whole lot of, gee, I wonder what's going on. Let me try to figure this out. This is broken. This is the corrective action you will take. All right, passing through 18,000, full standard. Make sure we got our 2992s in. And so it's just for me. I've always been weaker at systems. I've always been better off at the actual flying part, the stick and rudder stuff. And, all the training I did when I upgraded to captain, it was all really centered around the Volume 1 stuff in our manuals. Because that's the stuff I deal with on a daily basis. So the oral had been weak, but so he was very, very irritated when I really didn't perform well, and rightly so. So he was kind of cursing at me. He's like, God damn it, fly the effing airplane, right? And he was right, man. That was, that's totally valid. I should have done a better job picking up what the problem was, not getting involved in the ECAM, let the FO figure that part out and announce to me, hey, autopilot failure, right? So, the FO pulling up the gear without me telling them, I don't really care. There's been plenty of mistakes to go all the way around, including by myself. So, so that was it. That was probably one of the biggest. And then from there, you start dwelling on the mistakes you made. It becomes very hard. to kind of get ahead throughout the check ride. I passed. I didn't have to get rechained on anything. Honestly, I think in my entire career, both helicopters and the airlines, the amount of things I've actually ever had to retrain, gosh, I can't even really, a couple, 2 or 3 total time in 15, 20 years of taking check rides. So, a little bit, I was definitely disappointed. After that, the check ride I didn't think went particularly smoothly. I passed everything, but, he's the sim instructor's kind of on my case. It's fine. I'm kind of dwelling on the mistake I made. But, the thing about being an airline pilot is you really have to be able to compartmentalize what's going on, concentrate on what you need to do next. I did it. It just wasn't as smooth as I would normally like. So I kind of kicked myself in the butt afterwards. But it happens. I'll be honest with you. I take these check rides. I've been doing them in helicopters or airplanes now for, 20 years, probably since about 2004, 2006, when I started flying medevac in helicopters, and I was flying Part 135. And so, 2 a year for the last 20 odd years, and throughout that time, mistakes can and will get made. So that was the check ride what we were talking about before I had to leave, right? I'll be off, I think, until I'm due to go back in October, but I don't want to shock you guys, I have more vacation in October, and so I think I'd have to check our contract, but they normally won't schedule my check ride during my vacation month, and so I probably won't take my check ride until next November. So that one usually that one about a month prior, I'll just start reading like my volume 1 stuff. What did I make a mistake on the oral? Oh, he asked me, when on the Airbus at the very top there is a fire push button switch. He asked me what systems did it de-energize. And it's pretty easy, actually. Just look up at the overhead panel and you can just read, fuel, pneumatics, generators, all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of the answer I gave him. And then he's like, all right, so when we get to the fuel, what 2 systems are affected? And I'm like, oh, the high pressure fuel pump. Well, that's not it, right? So he's like, pump? What do you mean pump? And I'm like, now of course now I'm starting to question myself, like, oh shoot, isn't it the high pressure fuel pump? Is it the low pressure pump? Like, I'm sitting there going back and forth, and he's like, God damn it, what would you want to pump fuel in? And I'm like, oh, okay, valve, the high pressure fuel valve, the IDG return line, but he's already irritated at me, right? So, yeah, fair enough. I don't really care. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I haven't really kicked myself in the ass on that one. Okay, I misidentified valve pump. He knew what I meant, but once again, old school guy. That's how he wants it, and so anyway, so that was the check ride. I did that, and then immediately flew back, and then my wife and I, we just bought a apartment in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic that we're trying to get prepped for Airbnb. So went to the check ride, flew back. Immediately, I met her because she won't fly on my airline, and she went out a day before me. So I met her out in Santo Domingo. That was great. Had a great time. Maybe I'll post a picture down below if I remember. Had a really nice time. Obviously, the tragedy out there, if you followed the news, a couple weeks ago, there was a nightclub that had collapsed. It used to be actually her favorite nightclub. She was very familiar with that area. But I think the last count, 250 people dead, but there's going to be more because there's a plenty missing. So when we were out, the country really was kind of in mourning. Most of the restaurants were empty. All the clubs were closed. Not that we probably would have gone anyways, but still. So every time we went to dinner, there was hardly anybody there. But it was nice. We did the things that we needed to do. We needed to meet with our banker. We needed to go to 25 Climate 26. We needed to get some more furnishings for the house. We have a realtor company that or a management company that's be taking everything over for us, and they requested a couple things. So we went out to IKEA, Dominican Republic. So we did those kind of things. I came back the very next day, got sent out on a 2-day trip. Came back, got sent out on another 2-day trip, which I was down in San Juan, which was pretty nice, as always. So, you know, there's definitely some shenanigans on both trips. None of them went smoothly. A lot of BS going on. Got the first trip, we had to kick a guy off. The second trip, that turned into a real clown show as there was an incident. Our airline had a hard landing out in San Juan, so I was ferrying, well, not ferrying, but I had to ferry an aircraft from Philly up to Boston, pick up passengers, take those passengers to San Juan, because we're now short of a plane. If you're in the U.S., you probably have read about it or seen it. No one was hurt, but there was some good video of the engine catching fire on the go-around and hard landing and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into it. I don't really know the specifics, but I just had to take another plane down there, and you know, everything was super late and delayed. I was supposed to depart out of Philly at like 5 o'clock. I didn't depart till almost 6:30. Get up to Boston, short flight. I was supposed to leave Boston at like 7, taxed it in around 7, so now I'm just really late. There's no gates because they haven't planned for us to be there. This plane was supposed to leave at like 11 a.m. It's now 7 p.m. at night. So they've got us parked out in like the maintenance field, and now they're busing people out to the aircraft. All right, so we've leveled off here at flight level 260 and starting to accelerate here. So we're just looking at a speed here. Ground speed 260 knots and slightly accelerating. All right. Definitely faster than the PC-12. Anyway, so, you know, that took a long time to bus out the passengers. Of course, they forgot to fuel us up, and I'm taking like 42,000 pounds of Jet A, and I've got like 9,000, and they're going to pump in about, I don't know, roughly 1,000 pounds a minute, and we've already got the passengers up. I still don't have fuel, so that's like another delay. Then the flight attendants, all of them brand new, like they're on their second or third flight. There's a guy vaping in the bathroom or something, or claimed it was vaping, so they kicked him off the flight. They didn't have to. They could have red carded, but they kicked him off. Now we've got to escort him off the plane, and we can't. As I mentioned before, we're out in the middle of the maintenance field, or parking apron, and so we have to wait. There's no jet bridge, right? We can't just remove him off the plane. Now we got to wait for the cops to show up. Then I think it was a state police gets on board. He's like, "Hey, Captain, do you want to charge this guy?" I'm like, "No, I don't." So then he takes him off. Then we had a passenger throw up, and it became a biohazard because they didn't use the bag. I don't know. It's not my problem. So now we've got to get a biohazard cleanup. We've got to move people away from that row. And now we're finally getting ready to go. And then the flight attendants are telling me that, in fact, that the guy may not have been vaping. It may have been a false report by another passenger. So now they're trying to get the guy back on the plane, but of course no one can find him because he's been escorted off by the police, right? So, you know, I was supposed to leave at like, I don't know, my departure time was 7. I think I rolled out of Boston at like 10:30 at night. And of course, we have a very old airplane that does not have the HF radios, which means I have to hug the shoreline all the way down to Boston, all the way down the coast to Florida, then cut in, as opposed to just making a direct line over the water, because we don't have the radios to work in what's called the waters routes. So instead of being like a 3-hour and 15-minute flight, it was like a 4-hour, 15-minute flight, which means another 45 minutes, and I could have been in London. I mean, it was just a long ride, right? So, you know, on top of which, I think, was it that first 2-day trip, it was gusting 50 knots. Now I'm outside of my limitations, and so I'm calling up scheduling or dispatch and saying, "Hey man, I can't depart. I'm past my 38 knot crosswind or 35 knots for departure," right? And the way the angle was coming in, it was coming in about 40 knots or so, 38 knots. And dispatch is trying to tell me, "Oh, but the forecast is for only 30, so you're good to go." And I'm like, "No, that's not how that works." Once again, volume 2 stuff, and that's actually volume 2 airplane stuff, right? So I'm like, no, that's not how it works. So he's trying to fight me and trying to get me to go. I won't do it. So anyways, it's been a very exciting couple of weeks. So anyways, we have leveled off here at 2.6, so we still have another, what's it looking like, another hour and a half to go. I could tell you stories for another hour and a half, but I will not. I think that's enough for now. So I'll rejoin you probably as we're on short final. I've just got us into a basic RNAV approach, and so I'll probably just join you about, I don't know, 7 miles out or so, just as we're getting the aircraft kind of configured. We're not going to miss much here. At this point, I'll be starting the, which we may talk about maybe as I think we talked a little bit about the PC-12, but we definitely, as we get into large aircraft, descent management, energy management becomes a thing here. I don't think necessarily in this aircraft we have to worry about it as much. So anyways, that is a full review, whether you liked it or not, of the last 2 weeks for me. So kind of exciting, but you know, I haven't been recording, and unfortunately I screwed up the checkride thing, as I mentioned earlier. So no big deal. And having said that, I will see you down as we get a little bit closer. All right, check in with you later. Okay, back with you just about 5 minutes out from the initial approach fix. Unfortunately, because I had my recording equipment off, you guys are managing not to see the best and the worst I've ever done in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So what had happened is I was checking my fuel consumption. It seemed fairly high. Up here is a crossfeed, and at some point I must have clicked it. And what I ended up doing is completely draining out the fuel out of one side of the engine, and I didn't know until abruptly I had a complete flame out and spun the aircraft from about 18,000 feet. So I was able to get it, I was able to recover it, but that's the good part. The scores are going to reflect horribly. I mean, I think I was literally at one point probably pointed like 90 degree down. I was trying to stop the spin. So it got a little spicy. I managed to recover here at about 7,000 feet. Got the engine on the way down as I was recovering. I was able to turn the cross feed back open because I had completely drained the number two engine. So I was just checking. I think I was looking at, here's the auxiliary tanks, and I think I was trying to make sure the auxiliary tanks were going into the mains. Don't do that. Don't touch here. So I was able to redo the cross-feed flow again and balance out the tanks and restart the engine, all the while plummeting nearly to my doom. So that was exciting, but I didn't record it because I had everything off. Matter of fact, I wasn't expecting that to happen. So my initial thoughts on the King Air. For me, I just don't feel like the aircraft, actually, I need to start heading down here, so let's go vertical speed. Let's hit vertical speed on, and we will start heading down here. I don't believe the aircraft, just doesn't feel like it's complete. And it doesn't have VNAV capability. If we zoom in here real quick here, I can actually click on the autopilot system. That's pretty cool. It's all touchscreen up here, but if you click VNAV on off, nothing happens. So is a little bit annoying. It doesn't have VNAV capability, and you know, with these, I think this is the PT6. We should be able to go up to about 30,000 feet. Now, I can do energy management. I think we even talked a little about that earlier. I can work on my own energy management and descent planning. The very first plane I flew, the ERJ-145, at least in the airline, it didn't have VNAV capability. You just had to work it out all in your head. So, not the end of the world, but it is annoying. It doesn't have a top of descent marker on there. The other thing here, I'm gonna get ready to land here. So I zoom in here. you're seeing it's taking me to TU001, which is the final approach fix. No ability for me to choose like the initial approach fix a little bit further out so I can get myself set up. Can I overcome that? Probably. I'll have to use, see if I can load everything up from Navigraph and SimBrief and see if I can load in a flight plan showing out a little bit further the waypoint. But if we were going actual, I don't think I'd like to turn right into the initial approach fix here. So, all right, so we got a minute and 17, should be about 2,200 feet, coming down 1,000. So I'm just going to increase that rate of descent to about, let's go 15, 16, 17. Okay, we got to get down. And we'll start speeding, so I'll just start power. So I think that's a little bit annoying out of the King Air, not having VNAV. The button works, but nothing happens. No top of descent markers. The choosing waypoints here, definitely not as good as the PC-12. Really, it's just not. What else? My other observations. May or may not have a high fuel consumption, but we'll see. I'm gonna start running some numbers. I had enough fuel to go about a little over 800 miles, and this is only a 320 mile, 350 maybe. And we'll take a look at our fuel, and we're down to about 800 pounds of fuel. So I don't think I would make 800 miles, but so anyways, that's kind of my first impressions of the King Air. Not sure how long we'll stick with it. We're definitely gonna stick with it and make some money, but I can see probably upgrading sooner rather than later. I really got spoiled by the PC-12. I think it's a very well put together aircraft in terms of all the features. The ability to use the touchscreen stuff here I think is nice, but it's just not as good. Oh, I am really high. Let's pull out some power here. Let's bring in my first notch of flaps. Bring my gear down. Keep it down under 150 per second notch of flaps. A little bit higher. What a that was really exciting from about 18,000 feet all the way down. So we'll check our scores here at the end, and I will just knock off the autopilot. I'm going to have to do some hero stuff to make this work. All right, get back on path here, so start bringing some power back in. So this is only my third flight. I literally did one circuit around the traffic pattern just to kind of sort out my camera views, get an idea of actually how it feels. We're coming past and my bad combo. I did the checkride, which I'm sorry you guys didn't get to see, and then this flight. So I still have a lot to learn about the aircraft. All right, speed's looking good. Work it, but let's see if I can make
this. Landing time logged.
Figure my creaky rudder pedals do their thing. Supposedly everything, well, not everything. I've got 3 orders from Verpal. 2 should be in next week. Nothing like a little taxiway or runway excursion right here, no problem. So first flight in the King Air done. So we'll just taxi it in. We'll take a look at how badly my scores went just for fun. So it was cool recovering it. It had developed into a full-on spin by the time I kind of got my hands on it. Flaps. The colors seem kind of washed out to me. I don't know. Anyways, let's come down here. And we will shut off all the lights, but beacon. And let's...
Engine off time logged. The flight is finished. It has been monitored by OnAir.
All right. All right, so that flight is done. All right. No comforter safety bonus. No aircraft handling. I got the soft landing. Thank you very much. I don't know what happened to my claps. I don't know what FSR Realistic's doing. And flight score lights enabled at bonus. All right, so it wasn't a complete disaster. Oh, here we go. Max G's 2.5. Max bank angle 170 degrees. Max pitch 74. Nice. Really nice. All right. So we've completed this flight. I'll run through a couple more probably off camera, start getting used to the aircraft a little bit better for you. I think on the next flight, I'll walk you through the startup. It's pretty simple. As I mentioned before, you know, this is just an incomplete aircraft. And one of the things I wanted to mention was that there's just a lot of systems that are not working on it, inoperative. So definitely got spoiled by the PC-12. All right. Anyways, let's come back to the main page here. Once again, I appreciate everyone's support. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I will catch you all in the next one. Thanks for watching. Take care for now.